In case Aisha Farabia, no, I'm mispronouncing it again.
It's
What was it?
Fariba.
Fariba. Please apologize me if in the moment I forget how to pronounce it. Fariba. I'll try to forget.
That's okay. It's a natural problem now. I realize it's a natural problem.
Vikas, please start the session. We are live.
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session on paving the way to career success, tips for a good interview. Today, we will discuss how to prepare for interviews, especially in the backdrop of the new normal that the world is moving in towards post-COVID-19. In the first half of the session, we will discuss key skills and good practices that should be adapted to be successful in an interview. In the second part, we will do a role play session where I will ask some real life interview questions from the panelists to learn how to respond to such questions. Please write additional interview questions that you would like to know on how to handle. Before we begin, a few key housekeeping items. Feel free to write your comments, suggestions, and questions in the chat box below, and we will try to our best to answer as many questions as humanly possible. Today, we have an excellent panel with us to share their insights into nailing that dreaded interview for that dream position that you always wanted to get. Our first panelist is Ms. Aisha Amin. Aisha is a program manager at Amal Academy, a Stanford University-supported education venture. Over the last 2 years, she has mentored over 200 university students through a 3-month intensive blended learning career prep fellowship targeted towards building professional skills. She has done a master's in social policy from the University of Pennsylvania on the Fulbright Scholarship and has over 9 years of experience in leading social impact projects, especially in the fields of education, youth development, and gender equality. She is also leading a community-based organization, BATIC, that advocates for gender justice in rural Sindh. Our second panelist is Ms. Fariba Ahmed. Fariba is an educationist with more than a decade's experience in the education sector. She is currently a lecturer at Iqra University, Islamabad. Outside academia, she is also a blogger, business communication trainer, and content writer. She has worked as a master trainer with Punjab government and has done freelance training consultancy with the British Council. Fariba has also worked as an English instructor with the Access Program, a project of the Regional English Language Office at the US Embassy in Islamabad. Our final panelist is Mr. Tughril Ali. Tughril holds over 22 years of international experience in diverse industries. Over the last 12 years, he has been working on poverty alleviation using digital channels for distribution, such as microfinance, microinsurance, e-commerce, and mobile money. He is currently working as a consultant with an American firm that specializes in developing microinsurance solutions to protect farmers against climate change. Tughril holds an MS from MIT, an MBA from Warwick Business School, and a BS in Computer Systems Engineering from GIK Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today. So with that, let us start the session. My first question goes to Tughril. Tughril, as you know, the world is transitioning to a new normal post-COVID-19. The same holds for the job market. Traditional 9-to-5 jobs are disappearing and companies are opting for other solutions like work from home, short-term assignments, or even fixed-term consultancy positions. Even many conventional government jobs that used to be full-time are now advertised as fixed-term contracts without the perks that usually people found attractive in the past. In such a dynamic, how should people position themselves to adapt to this changing environment?
Thank you very much. That's a really good question and a very, very relevant one given the circumstances in the job market nowadays. I've gone through that transition myself, going from working for a corporate to moving more towards a consultancy role where contracts come into play. And so my first advice is that you have to accept that this change is happening, because I think there's a certain element of denial as well from our educationists, from the fresh graduates who are coming out, where you expect that the world will go back to what it was, say, 3-4 years ago. It's not going to happen. In fact, this change is going to accelerate. And the reason I'm saying that is because what COVID has done is redefine the way people work. And so there's now, people working from home, buildings aren't there, offices aren't there anymore. And we've realized this is okay. This works. So realize that the change is happening, number one. Number two, I would advise people to become very flexible about how they look at a career. This is not so much the new economy, which is emerging, is more or less a gig economy, which is that you don't really prepare for a 40-year career, with a certain service or a certain company, but rather there are more and more freelancers coming forward. So it's very, very heavily focused on skills and not so much on which degree you got from which institution you got it. So I would advise the fresh graduates, the young graduates who are out there, think about flexibility in your approach to your career, how you position yourself. Think along the lines of skills, not degrees. And thirdly, think along the lines of the gig economy being able to offer services specific to projects rather than looking at, like a 10-year career with one company. That would be my advice.
Thank you so much for that, Aurel. And I really agree with the concept of skill development and skill building. And that actually leads me to a follow-up question. We saw that in the past, the jobs they were usually traditional in nature. For example, a simple electrical engineer would have done, or a financial analyst, or an IT developer, or many other jobs like that. But with the advent of, for lack of a better word, disruptive technologies globally, we see new positions that keep popping up in the market. And they are usually an amalgamation of the traditional skill set. For example, cloud engineer, or data miner, or search engine optimization user, a lot of other positions. So with the local education still heavily focused on traditional courses, how should an interested candidate, how should they build their profile or develop their skill set to actually target these new positions?
Again, that's a very good question. And now I'm going to tell you, give you feedback from the industry itself. The industry from the feedback from the tech industry in Pakistan right now is that there is an acute shortage of the required skill sets in Pakistan. And that's, again, because our educational institutes, the kind of graduates they're churning out, they're not adequately skilled for what is actually now needed by these startups, which are springing up all over the place. So one of the biggest crunches right now we have in the market is qualified tech resource. And anybody who has managed to develop his or her skills along these lines is sitting on a gold mine. And for the next 5 years, basically you're going to be in very high demand. So what candidates can do, look beyond your institutes. They are not right now up to mark. They are not equipped. So what can you do? You can take on a lot of these online courses, Coursera, for example. There's Udemy. There are several other online courses, which will piecemeal deliver you the kind of courses that you can take. You can enrich yourself. Keep doing these. Build skills around coding. Build skills around UX, that's a user experience, customer life journeys. These are the skill sets that are going to become very important. User interface design, and then just make sure that you stay up to date with the technology changes which are happening around you. So as far as the skill sets are concerned, look beyond your institutes, look to build from online courses. And then make sure that you have an eye on what is happening in the ecosystem around you, and you'll be able to keep up to date. But if you're going to wait for somebody to come and spoon feed you, it's not going to happen, especially not the way universities are being set up right now.
I agree with that. And I know the government of Pakistan is also doing its fair share with introducing these skill development workshops. And I believe there's TEFTA. And I think a lot needs to be done at the university level at this point. They need to introduce these innovative courses and all of these other skills to inculcate into students. So I'm going to actually tap into your experiences. I know you have a lot of experience in microfinance and microinsurance, and this actually segues a little bit into that. We know that there's a lot of opportunity in the startup and entrepreneurial space, and funding is being made available like anything to ideas that are innovative and that actually make a lot of economic sense at this point. So what advice is there for people who are looking to explore in launching their own startups? Is it better to start a career with a firm and then launch, or is it better to just take the plunge directly?
That's again a great question. And this is a question that I get asked several times. To be honest, I don't know if there's one correct answer to this. I can give you my impression, and I think this is open to debate. My feeling is that these startups, they're looking for people who can deliver real value. Because they take very heavy bets on you. They've managed to raise investment. They've got these huge aspirations about scaling. And so they're looking for the best possible resources out there. In my experience, somebody can be certified, have the right diplomas, be from the best university, but without some amount of work experience, without having some idea of what it's like to match a customer's need or how to serve a customer. Without some idea of that, you may not be able to apply your skills to the best, that you can. So I think, in my opinion, I think it's always good when you've gotten out of a university, get into a good organization, spend a few years, try to find a good manager, somebody who can really be a good mentor to you. And just throw yourself in, gain the right experience. It's going to open up your worldview. And at that point, when the right opportunity comes forward, take that plunge, go forward, do your own thing. But if you just try to do it off the bat, then there are so many things that can possibly go wrong in running a business, setting it up your own venture. So that would be my advice.
And I think, again, the role of university becomes more pronounced over here. They should, I know that NUST, I believe, and then LUMS are also doing these incubation centers, and where they actually help the student with their ideas. That needs to be done more, and that needs to be done at academic level.
You see, that's a very good point. And I'll tell you what, my advice to universities, and I realize we have panelists who are from academia, and I would put this forward to them. My advice to universities is that you have to bring in people who are actually working in this space, rope them in, bring in applied learning. Because there's enough of theory going around, but theory unfortunately doesn't support you once you hit the, when the rubber meets the road. You need to have some amount of mentorship coming in from the industry. You need to have people coming in telling you what is going on in the industry, where are the gaps, what are the opportunities for these students right now who are coming out, and where they should focus. So with that, I'll stop. Sorry if I took up too much time.
No, thank you so much. In fact, if Aisha or Fariba want to add to this, the specific things, since you are from the academia.
I just agree with what Tughlal was saying, especially because when working with students, fresh graduates, and there's a huge gap in skill building that we see. The expectations that industry has from the students, clearly universities are not adequately doing it. And this is where so my work is to build that skill gap, although we work on soft skills, but pretty much we try to build that gap. So yeah, I do agree with that.
Yeah. We have a question from Shahina, and she says, where do oldies like me fit into all of this? Trust me, 60 is not old. Is there a place for us in a world that is driven by technology? So people at a certain age bracket, the learning process is slow. So what advice would you give to people like this who want to do a career change, who are looking for a different career, or maybe their own business?
May I respond to that one, or would somebody else like to? Okay.
Please go ahead.
So first of all, like you said, 60 is not that old. In fact, I've lived around the world, and this is one thing that I really want to say to our people. please stop thinking in numbers. We seem to be in such a hurry to age that, as soon as you graduate from your university, you start counting, oh, now I'm 25, quarter of a century old, my life is over. No, it's not. And this is the biggest difference, by the way, between how our culture tends to view aging and, some of the more innovative societies. So number one, I would say 60 is not at all old. Number two, some of the most, I think, successful entrepreneurs have actually come out, with their business ideas after they hit 40. And from there, they scaled up. So there is no right age as such. If you've got experience, you've got something to offer. It's all about forming the right kind of team and delivering something to the market. Fear is one factor that you need to take out of the equation completely. If you're going to be in the space of innovation, the fear of failure needs to disappear. So my advice to the lady who asked the question is form the right team. There are skill sets that you may be able to acquire that you already have. There are certain gaps that you may find in your knowledge. Bring in the right people who can work with you and deliver your vision, because the vision is what is important. Everything else is just, that's the toolbox. Technology is tools. It's nothing more than that. So that will keep changing. Bring in the right people, they'll make it happen.
Thank you so very much.
Because I have a question, I have a statement which I'll be adding to Shahina's question. Shahina posed one of the questions. She is of like, what about the 60 years? Sir has been very detailed in his answer and his elaboration. Whatever he has talked about, that perfectly makes sense. Let me tell you one thing, when we are talking about technology driven. So this is a sad reality that when we actually make a difference, like I'm a teacher's trainer, whenever I teach or I train teachers, so majority of the teachers who are there in 50s, 60s, they complain that we have actually lived a certain age of our lives. How can we actually turn to technology? My point is this: since I have the exposure of working with corporate, with administration, with academia, with teaching, with different sectors, I realize that the technology awareness or understanding our students have, or the people or the youngsters have, they are not more than that social media usage. So when we are talking about exact or correct use of technology, so everybody is on the very scratch level where Shahina is actually feeling herself right now. So I must say that, as Sir has pointed out, that it's not the age. It is all about understanding your skills, identifying your passion, identifying the exact people who would be working with you, and then go with it. And then, as Sir has pointed out, that it's all about thinking out of the box. The moment you'll be thinking out of the box, you'll be identifying what is my passion. This is the thing that I have to follow. Then you can always do it. As one more thing that I'll be adding in here, as Shahina has pointed out, that is technology driven. Trust me, as a teacher who has worked with, corporate, with different sectors, even with media, I realized when I shifted to technology, I did not feel that confident, because I realized the crux of the things, or the actual things that I was supposed to use, I was not really good with them. Be Zoom, Teams, Meet, or any other app, or even if I'm using Socrative, if I'm using any other app in order to teach my students, I was not really good. Then I realized that there is a gap which is actually separating my academic journey from the technologically driven age. So that is something I have to fill, and it has nothing to do with age. Be a boy of 25 or be a woman or man of 60. If you identify where are the gaps and you can work on that, you can work it right there and then, and you can always improve. That is something.
Thank you so much, Fariba. Rightly said. Thank you so much, Togrul. Let's move on to our second panelist, Aisha. Aisha, the concept of cold calling sounds really frightening to a lot of applicants, me included in the start, especially fresh graduates. So in your opinion, how vital are cold calls and or cold emails, especially in a post-COVID era where we don't get a lot of options for physical interaction and card exchanging with prospective employees? And how should an applicant prepare to make cold calls and cold emails? And maybe take a few seconds to explain what a cold call actually is, or a cold email actually is.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that question, Vikas. And I do agree, sending cold emails or cold calls could be a little intimidating, especially for introverts. And I think this is a resource that's not very heavily used, especially in Pakistan. A lot of students, fresh graduates do not know how it could work out. So, so cold call could, so for example, let me explain a few situations where you could use a cold call or cold email. I personally think that cold calls could be a little more intimidating than cold emails because, you're getting the live response, their email, mein to you write something and you send it out. So if you want to work in an organization per se, and you want to know more about the open positions there, you could just, simply call someone, introduce yourself and ask about a position. Or if there's a position that you're interested in, but you, want to kind of reach out to the HR manager, hiring manager, or reach out to a manager from a concerned department, you could also send them, call them, and show your interest. How important it is, I would think it's very important, especially because you were mentioning that the in-person networking is not there, now, especially because of the COVID era. And in a job process, it's important to stand out because so many people, so many fresh graduates are applying for same job positions, and there are so many graduates graduating every year. So the key is to stand out and to increase your visibility as a candidate. And I think cold calling and sending cold emails is a great tool to increase your visibility because not a lot of people, or at least not every candidate, is doing it. And how do you prepare for it? I would really point out that it is very important that you are super prepared, that maybe a lot of your emails would not be responded to and a lot of your cold calls would not, perhaps, like, maybe you could get a harsh response, right? So, and that's fine. First step would be just to be mentally prepared that maybe out of 20 calls you make, maybe only one of them will pick up, and their response also might be might not be very positive. I do want to share a few tips on how you can write those emails and how you can prepare a script. Is that okay? Do we have time
Yes,
to do
please
that?
go on.
Okay,
Please.
sure. So I would always recommend sending an email first before you call. And getting an email of a certain company, of a hiring manager, is not that difficult. You can get it from a website. You can leverage your network to find who are the right people you should be calling or emailing to, like what the concerned people. For an email, one mistake that I see that a lot of students or fresh graduates make is that they send the same email to every recruiter. They don't personalize, they don't tailor it. So it's very important, if you know the name of the hiring manager, write their name. It grabs attention. Try to tailor and customize your email according to the kind of position you're looking for and the kind of organization you are reaching out to. Keep it very, very short. Add your contact details. Be very specific. Avoid grammatical errors, spelling errors. I think a lot of students, they say they don't proofread. They just, they think cold calling is like close your eyes and send it to anyone. No, there has to be a strategy. There has to be approach. Similarly, for the calls, I highly, highly recommend to prepare something. Like, what are you going to talk about? Prepare a script, research, and then tailor it according to the person you're talking to. Prepare a 30-second or 1 minute, 30-second is good enough for a call. Prepare an elevator pitch that summarizes who you are, why you are calling, and briefly describes like where you stand, like what is your most recent qualification, so that the other person, the hiring manager, can know that you are someone who could be useful resource. And if they're not free at that time, maybe offer them, okay, ask them if there's a right time. What is the right time to call? So, professionalism is very important.
Right. Just to add one point to this, the first thing I've seen that a lot is you should have a professional email. I've seen people write Pokemon Friends or something at the rate of this. So guys, do make an email with your name or something, a very professional email. The other thing, for grammatical errors, try the free version of Grammarly. I mean, I think it's a good asset to use. So thank you so very much, Aisha. The second question, or the follow-up question that I have for you is, we know that the interview process can be extremely grueling for a various number of reasons. And just one of those is inappropriate or unconventional questions. how should an interview tackle these questions? And I'm just going to give you an example. I was doing a gender study on a recent project, and I interviewed women engineers about their professional life and the hiring experience that they had to face. And many engineers told me, women engineers told me that they were asked different variations on the same thing, which was, how do you compare yourself to a man who can be hired in this position? So what is your take on that?
Okay, that's a very interesting point and also a very interesting question. And unfortunately, it's very common. You do get asked some inappropriate questions. How do you handle it? First, it's very important to understand why they're asking this question. And there are different nuances and dynamics attached to it. So a lot of times you would see some of the hiring managers, unfortunately, a lot of organizations in Pakistan do not have very trained HR staff. So chances are that the person, interviewing you might not be very well trained, which does happen very commonly in Pakistan. Second, the question that you mentioned about, women, how do they, they ask this question. In fact, I know in some of my initial years of my career, I think I was constantly asked what are my plans regarding marriage. And, at that time, I did not know how to answer that question. But, with time, I realized that unfortunately, there are certain stereotypes that, the hiring managers or HR managers have with regards to certain people, especially like, let's say, women. So generally, they would assume that if it's a female employee, they would not be comfortable, let's say, going for field work, या वो office job को prefer करेंगे, या if the need be, let's say, if you're working on an assignment, they will not put in extra hours, or they are secondary earners, so they would leave the job as soon as they get married. So you get asked these inappropriate questions. So there are two things. A, if you think that if you can analyze why they're asking questions, you can, first I recommend, handling it very professionally, because whether or not you want to work at a certain place is when you're offered a job, but how you conduct yourself in an interview speaks what kind of candidate you are and what kind of, a professional you are. So taking it very professionally, very subtly. So, for example, if you have the question that you have shared, maybe a good strategy would be telling them that your ability to contribute to the organization or to add value is not affected, by your gender or how many hours, So perhaps like ensuring that is a good strategy. Second, it also gives you a chance to see, or these could also be stress questions. A lot of companies ask stress questions on purpose to see how well you handle a stress situation. Do you get defensive? Like, do you get angry? Like, how would you respond to that? So again, it's important to see why they're asking this question. Thirdly, it also gives you a chance to analyze the work culture of the company. So let's say if they're asking you if you would be comfortable working for late hours, later on you can see if this is the kind of culture you want to work in. Or let's say कोई उन्होंने बड़ा sexist question पूछ लिया है, and your values and you want to be in a company, that has a more inclusive culture. This can help you analyze whether or not you want to work in this organization. But again, that analysis I would suggest that वो आप जब decision making में आए तब वो करें, उस time आप उसको professionally tackle करें.
Thank you. I actually think you should use these questions as an opportunity, like you said. I mean, honestly, it tells you a lot. My last question from you would be, body language is essential in adding depth to a conversation. Subtle gestures and movements, they give person a great deal of information, which is usually not conveyed through the spoken word alone. So what qualifies as excellent body language during an interview, and how can an interviewee use gestures and body movements to their advantage?
Again, excellent question, and it's very, very important having your body language right. And I think it's even more challenging in a virtual space because अब interviews सारे virtual हो रहे हैं, you can only see face and maybe hand gestures. So it becomes a little more challenging because you're not going there as a whole personality. I'm happy to share some tips for virtual sessions as well, and also like for in-person interviews. So I believe जो आपकी body language है ना, that portrays your confidence, and it shows like how you are present there, how happy you are, how excited you are about a certain opportunity. It's very important that first you're confident. I mean ये तो बहुत ही एक वो set rule है कि interview में आपने confidence लेके साथ में जाना है, and that confidence helps you in portraying a positive, a confident body language as well. So I've seen like a lot of students, and it's fine, आप nervous होते हो एक interview में, there's a lot on stake, but it is very important to be constantly, to be smiling. लगना चाहिए कि you are happy to be there, you're excited about the opportunity, you're looking forward to meeting the interviewers, you're looking forward to interacting with people at the organization. So generally, like, smiling is something that gives a positive vibes. It shows that you are, you're excited to be there. It conveys your positivity, so that helps. Apart from that, when you're sitting for an interview, it's very important that you sit up straight. You're not slouching, you're not hunching. बहुत casual, relaxed आप नहीं हैं, तो वो जो आपका posture है वो बड़ा आपका it should be conveying confidence, but again उसमें humility होनी चाहिए. ऐसे नहीं कि आप टांग पे टांग रख के बैठ जाएं, तो casual भी नहीं हो और बिल्कुल वो आप slouch नहीं कर रहे हो. So that helps. Using hand gestures, I think that just engages the audience. Especially जब virtual आपकी होती है, उसमें बड़ा जरूरी है कि आप अपनी screen को ऐसे रखें कि आपके hand gestures दिख रहे हों. You're not frowning on questions. You are making an eye contact with the interviewer. And I'll show you the all techniques. Jaise, for example, you're leaning in when they're asking a question, so it shows that you're actively listening. You are subtle nods हो आपकी कि पता चले कि आप actively उधर हैं, आप सुन रहे हैं. So these are a few things that can convey a very positive image and a confident image of yourself on the whole, and also like make that conversation memorable for the interviewer. Because at the end of the day, it's important कि आपका overall impact क्या रहा है interview पे. Like, did they like you as a person? Did they have a nice conversation? So these things really help in that.
So just quickly, we have a question from Mohammed Ahmed. How to make interviews feel happy or cool? So what would you do to make the interviewer feel happy or cool?
It's very important to understand कि जो सामने आपको interview कर रहा है, to humanize them. They are humans, हम बड़ा उसमें वो हो जाते हैं कि oh, they're interviewers. So it's very important that you have like a normal conversation with them. You go, if they ask you how you are doing, you ask them how they are doing, how is their day. You smile, you show gratitude कि अच्छा आप उनको end में thank you जरूर बोलें for taking out time. Usually I also recommend students to send a thank you email after the interview. तो वो भी एक अच्छा gesture होता है. So just important to kind of humanize the whole experience, and also understand that you are there for an interview, but then you're also there to see if you want to work there at that organization. So आपके पास भी थोड़ा decision making power होता है. I think that relaxes a lot of things and it helps in the overall conversation.
Thank you so much. Quickly moving on to our third panelist, Fariba. My first question for you would be, one aspect of a candidate's profile most often overlooked is not being able to differentiate between a CV and a resume. What is the basic differences between both? Some basic differences between both, and how should a candidate decide whether to send a CV or a resume for a particular position? And finally, how important it is to customize a resume for a job.
Okay. I have unmuted myself. I've heard a lot from the worthy panelists, and I would be building on that. As we have already talked about the role of academia, and we have talked about how important it is. Normally, since I am connected to the university students, and I tell them this thing really importantly, that why do you enter university is something you need to understand. Whenever you get, unfortunately, it's something that we need to realize, that our students are not into skill learning. Like Sir has very well pointed out that our institutions are not that much well structured to get them well trained for the skills they are needed to learn. But at the same time, as a faculty member of a renowned university, at the same time, I had an exposure of working with multiple universities. I can say this thing, that we have made our students run in the race of CGPA. I'm so sorry. The students are not into learning of what they have to do. For example, when I teach my students, I tell them that you have to produce this thing, you have to present this thing. Even if we have to go with interviewing process, I'll ask them to watch this thing and then practice it. For them, this is something really not effective because they believe that they have to be shown some PPT, they have to write it down, and they have to do it by the end of the day. There should be some written document, even if they bunk the class, that is justified. You ask a question, how to differentiate between CV and resume. The most important thing that I would tell, and I always tell my student, is like CV is curriculum vitae, which is a detailed summary of everything that you possess, from your academic achievement to your experiential learning, to the experiences you have, to the exposure you have, to the hobbies that you have, to the soft skills that you have. Everything would be in your curriculum vitae. And then comes resume. What is resume? Resume would be a chunk. For example, if you have the experience with IT and you have specialized in different fields, however, your specialization is, for example, in graphic designing, and there is a position, and you need to actually accustom, or you need to make or structure your CV as per the demand of that very job, that would be known as resume. In shorter version, I tell my students, see, there is an aim. Aim has got certain objective. Bigger thing is known as macro, thing is known as aim. The smaller things that actually connect all of them and take you to the biggest thing is known as the objectives. So summary is more like, a series that actually a summary, complete summary. However, when we talk about resume would be targeted to a specific job. For example, if somebody is asking for a graphic designer and you would say that I'm a good swimmer and I had won a certificate in that. And if somebody asks you that we're looking for a graphic designer, and you would say, I sing really well because I had been a part of debate competition or a singing competition. See, CV would be telling about a lot of things. And then resume would be targeted to the specific job. And resume is something you keep on modifying, but it is related. For example, as a teacher, I'm a teacher and my specialization is in training. So I would actually be making a resume which is related to the experiences and exposure and conferences and the meetings and the, everything I have attained in that very particular field. And I should know that what is resume. Unfortunately, our students, they don't know the difference between CV and resume. And your question was like, how a student should know. What I have to, let me tell you one thing, Bakas, this is very much unfortunate that our students, they hardly make their CVs. They hardly make their CVs. I have known someone and they told me that once, I have got my CV and I went somewhere and, the panelists, they asked me a question and they told me that, okay, you did this thing. And the guy was like, ma'am, I just started thinking, did I actually do that? So that is one of the biggest errors. We need to actually impart this concept in our students that the qualification is something that brings you to scratch if you don't have skill. What is skill? Skill is basically getting yourself into the market, establishing yourself. The way Aisha has talked about that the world is getting really competitive for a single scholarship. A lot of people would, when you're not able to, why would you buy a product, Wakas? You'll be buying the product because it's fascinating, attractive, its features are good, and because it is marketed in a way that you want to buy that. Likewise, for a CV or a resume, first of all, you should know either I have to make a CV or resume. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, we get it overlapped because CV is a different thing. Resume is a different thing. CV is detailed. There is no specific length. Resume is related to the job. It is targeted. It has to focus on one particular skill that you possess or experiences or exposure you have got. And it is to be aligned as per that. Curriculum vitae is very detailed. It can go longer than that. First, you should be knowing what is the difference between that. And after that, you can modify it. And then how do I need to understand this thing, what I have to send? It is the job requirement, which would be telling me what. Sometimes they ask you for send a CV along, with a cover letter. or sometimes they ask only for resume. Resume is something that has got, you might be knowing that has got somehow cover letter within that would be telling about your specific targets and goals. So that is something really important, and it's really unfortunate that majority of the students who had to market themselves the way sir has also pointed out, that universities are not aligned or not made to compete on those grounds. At the same time, my point is this, that even if a teacher is trying to teach them the basic contents, so there is a gap that we always feel. I usually felt that thing, that even if you deliver, they mostly rely that somebody would be filling their form for admission. If you have to apply for the scholarship, you'll be making a call to your friend, please fill my application form. However, you're a student of master's or PhD, I mean, that is something you should do. You are asking someone to make a CV or a resume for you. That is your responsibility. There was a question from Muhammad Ahmed who asked how to make interviewers feel happy or cool. I will give 3 tips: research, practice, prepare, and practice. First of all, you need to research. After that, you need to prepare and keep on practicing. Trust me, if interviewee himself or herself is happy and he's cool, trust me, interviewers would automatically be cool and happy. If you're not confident, your CV is all folded up in your pocket, it has got a stain of anything, you don't know it is to be properly placed, you don't know how to go, how to formally greet, how you dressed up, what is the job you've applied, what are the things in your CV, the most important thing. Are you supposed to send a CV or resume? You don't know about it. Then you would never be confident, you will never feel cool, you will never feel happy. Every challenge would be a big dilemma and you would never be able to market yourself.
Thank you so much, Fariba. Just to add to that, what I do is I have a curriculum vitae. I have a CV, I put everything in it, but then when I have to apply for different positions or any consultancy positions, I plug irrelevant stuff and then make a 1-page resume. And that's what I float out. But you need to have a CV for your own sake.
Yes.
So quickly moving to the second question. We know that nothing beats face-to-face interaction, but with many interviews being conducted through online platforms these days, through Zoom or Skype, what are some essential points that an interviewee should think about and work on ahead of the interview? And I know Aisha touched on this a little bit. If you could share your viewpoints on it as well.
Okay, I would be dividing, because I'll be dividing it into certain portions. It is an interviewee, what he or she has to do when it comes to the time when we feel that the idea of face-to-face interaction has become worn out in the post-COVID or while COVID stage. While COVID, because it's going on every day, there is a new phase, and there might be chances that you might have a live interview or a live face-to-face interaction at the 11th hour. You might receive an email due to the post-COVID conditions. We have changed our schedule. Now your meeting would be on Team and we'll be meeting on that very time. So your question is like, what are the things that a person who is going to be interviewed need to keep in mind? First of all, the way Sir has talked about, you need to be flexible. No matter what challenge you are going to encounter, if you need to market yourself, be happy with a smiling face to take challenges. The second thing is the world is changing. There is a constant transformation. Our education has moved from classrooms traditional teaching to this very screen where a teacher might not be able to see the student, but still needs to ensure that the student is not sleeping, which we know that so many times students were sleeping, they sleep and they even don't respond, and their class fellows, they message, ma'am, he's not feeling well, or his internet is not there, how come he knows? But still, challenges are there. So the question that, what are the things that, first of all, you need to understand that technology is the need of the time. There is a transformation that has come. There is nothing that you can escape. If you want to be through the market, you need to be flexible and you need to modify yourself. And then when we talk about that, what are the things that I have to keep in mind? I need to know the place where I sit. I need to know that I have to turn on my camera. What is the costume I have to wear? I need to know that my mic and the other things are working appropriately. I need to know what are the things that I have to answer. See, there is only one difference that has occurred, and that is the technology. Technology has come in between us. You might see the panelists. There might be, for example, if Aisha is sitting If sir is sitting or sir is there, or if it might be a live session, obviously I would have seen them. Right now I'm seeing them. I'm seeing the exact position or the place they're sitting. I'm seeing how they're responding. I'm seeing their facial expressions. I'm seeing their nonverbal, communicative, those, symbols that they're giving. So the only difference that has come is the physical thing has moved onto the screen. And rather, I trust that, or I have a strong belief on this thing, that it is more of a blessing. Like, people should be thankful that you don't have to travel. Obviously, there are so many things, like when you are in a live interview, your body language, you might have been dressed really well, or there might be a lot of things, and you later on you say that if I would have been in face-to-face interaction, I might have been well, but the time has gone. Now we are on the screen. Try to prove yourself on the screen. If you're giving a presentation, you should know your PPT is ready. If you are going to play a music and you're going to demonstrate something, you should know it's working well. Always try to research and practice. Unless you don't practice it, trust me, be it face-to-face or be it a virtual session, you can never ever be successful. And the second thing is, a person who becomes overconfident is the biggest loser, I always say. As a teacher, whenever I leave my class, for example, if I'm actually training teachers in British Council, or if I'm training teachers in Beacon House, if I'm training teachers, government teachers, my work is to deliver and give my best, accommodate them, try to get them all involved. Likewise, for a person who is showing up for an interview, he is an interviewee or he should try to get himself or herself prepared as per all the challenges that can come. And that can only be prepared once you know, this technology, I have to prepare. This is the place I have to sit. There should not be any kind of distortion. This is my internet connectivity, I have to check. This music I am playing, it must work well. These are the expected questions I have to answer. Why not to practice it with my siblings, with my friends, or why not to connect to a friend who can actually take my interview on Skype? So everything is in your hand till the time you're in front of an interviewer. And if an interviewee wants the interviewer to be cool and happy, then you need to market yourself. And marketing is only possible when you make yourself a brand. So you can only make yourself a brand when you're prepared.
Thank you so much, Fariba. If you could quickly comment in 1 to 2 minutes, I had a thought on this, and this is an important part of the interview process, and that is pre and post interview follow-up emails. How long after the interview should the emails be sent out, and how should they be structured? If you could just comment on it in 2 minutes, because we have to go to the
would you
next
please
section.
repeat? How?
So pre and post follow-up emails, so interview emails that people send out before and after the interview. How long after the interview should those emails be sent out, and how should they be structured? But since we are running short on time, if you could just wrap it up in 2 minutes so that we can go to the next section.
I'll be taking 2 minutes. First of all, pre-interview strategy. Pre-interview is something that an interviewee is to be relaxed, because you'll be getting an email, you will be informed about the schedules, you'll be informed about a lot of things. If you have any query or question, you can always respond that. So pre is not your headache. Interviewee's major concept or major thing comes when the interview is done. Now you might have given a very good interview and you are inquisitive to know what I have to do or what is to be asked. Then remember one thing, that ideally there is a difference between 10 to 14 days. Ideally, like, you should be waiting for 1 week, or it can go up to 14 days. You can send an email, but that email should not be that I haven't been given an interview and I want to know what has happened. It should be a thank you email, where you would actually, first of all, thanks them or thanks the audience for being there. And you would mention that it was a very, something that you have learned, a good experience. Then you can also talk about the things that you have missed, how you can be a good choice for them if you had been, appointed, how you stand out. And finally, you can conclude on a very good note. So that is something you can always do. And that should be 10 to 14 days gap.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Fariba. And I see that we have a question from Anam Chaudhary, and this relates to the second bit as well. So let's just go to the second session, which is the mock-up questions. So these are some of the questions that I had to deal with. These are real life questions, and a couple of my friends, I had to source this. And these are some of those common questions or some of those difficult or weird questions that people have encountered. And I'm going to ask the one that Anam just did, but I'm gonna expand the horizon for it. And so how should an interviewee deal with an extremely technical or archaic question, which they perhaps studied 10 years ago, or they didn't? I mean, they just studied it, but they don't remember the theory to at that precise moment. So how should those questions be dealt with? And feel free, anyone can answer it.
Okay, I can take that question. So a few things. Firstly, if it's a very technical question, so basically, if it's a question related to basics, एक चीज मैं सबको हर fresh graduate को कहती हूँ that always brush up your basics. So let's say if you're a management student, at least go and see some basic management theories. So brushing up. So if you do not know a basic concept from your field that you've studied for 4 years, that's probably going to put a bad impression. But if it's, if something very technical, or something that maybe that's not that important, and if there's, and generally this happens when it's a technical question. So a few things you can do. First, there are some bridging techniques that you can use, and why you should be using those bridging techniques is that sometimes immediately we can't think of a response, क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं हमारी memory में वो से related कोई ना कोई information होती है. So first, it's important to kind of see if you can remember it. So you can use some bridging techniques, like maybe you can ask them to repeat the question or elaborate that question. And meanwhile, you can get your, thinking process going, and you can see if the response is somewhere in your brain. So first, if you see this question, it generally जब test में होता है ना, exam में, that you see a question, you're like, ये तो मैंने नहीं पढ़ा हुआ, but then you start thinking, and then you are like, okay, maybe I can at least, answer half of this question. So first strategy would be use that, and maybe asking for elaboration is good, because sometimes maybe that elaboration can help you remember that. In any case, you can't remember it at all, you can apologize that you don't remember it, but you are happy to, go and find out that answer. And, if you need this during your work, you will be happy to go and, brush up your skills on a certain theory, because they want to see how you're approaching that situation. So even if you don't know, that's fine, but they want to see what is the follow-up. Are you willing to go back and see that? Are you someone who does not know a certain answer on your job? Are you someone who will go and find the answer? That's more important.
Thank you. If Tughril or Fariba want to add to it, or should I move on?
I have one point. I'm so sorry, sir.
Gigi, please
I
go
have
ahead,
one
please.
point. As Aisha has been really detailed, I'll just wind it up in 2 minutes. Like, if there is a question that you don't know, Aisha said that there is a schema. Schema means a stock information, and you would try to, trigger that by asking question. But if you don't know, refrain from going with the wrong answer. Likewise, that as a trainer, I also realize that there might come a lot of question I don't know. As a teacher, I always tell my student, I'm not a walking dictionary. I accept that I am in a learning phase. If they ask me something, I tell them that that's a very good question, a very positive question, would surely be adding it to my knowledge. Let me check it, and then I'll get back to you. So yes, if you don't know the answer, please do not go with the stubborn attitude of, no, sir, I guess this is correct. Tell them, sir, this is something really sounds really good. I do not have enough knowledge about it, but I would love to research. So be positive with a smiling face, with a positive attitude. You can always answer that. Thank you.
Tughril.
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly the same thing. K, don't fake it. That's probably the worst thing that you can do, because the interviewer, knows the right answer. So agar aap galat karte hain, to then it's not just a case of you not knowing, but it's also you trying to fool the interviewer, and they realize that. So wo na karna.
Right. So my next question is actually something that I always told my students that they need to have it in their back pockets, which is an elevator pitch. Because this is the first question that usually gets asked, which is, you have 30 seconds to sell me your profile, go. So how should, and this actually relates to what Aisha said a little while ago, and this relates to the concept of cold calling actually, because whenever you call up someone, you have those 30 seconds to grab their attention. So how should one sell themselves in 30 seconds?
So in my opinion, देखें आपके पास 30 seconds हैं. The information that you're putting across is probably going to get you a second interview, or that's going to be your exit point. So a lot depends on the context. You have to know who is asking the question and for which organization or which job description it is. And you have to bring forward, I think, 2 or 3 main things. Number one, आपको अपना जो experience है उसको correlate करना है with the job description itself. So don't like go through your entire CV, bring out 2 to 3 points that relate you directly to the job that you're applying for. Number two, in the space that you've got left, try to set yourself apart from the other candidates by mentioning something about yourself which is unique. So if, for example, you're a software engineer, you're applying for a job, आपने अपनी skill sets 2-3 चीजें बता दी हैं जो relate कर रही हैं, but then maybe mention a project or 2 that you've done in the past, which places you with the right kind of experience, so that you stand out. So in about 30 seconds, that's the best you can do, and try to be pleasant about it as well.
So just a follow-up thing, do you think 30 seconds is enough, or should they push it? Because I know that people have the tendency to listen to the first 20 seconds or 30 seconds. What do you think is the ideal time for an introduction?
I think if done right, 30 seconds are more than enough. Because honestly, the longer you drone on and on, people start losing attention also. I think अगर आप ये elevator pitch जो है इसका idea अगर आप देखें तो this is actually from the investor book. So, new business ideas that come up, they'll give you 30 seconds. So if they're going to give you 30 seconds for investing potentially millions of dollars into your organization down the line, I think to sell yourself, that's also enough time.
Because I have a point here. 30 seconds I had talked about that is sufficient. Let me tell you that in my university, if I'm having a class of 100 students, only 10 students would be able to sell themselves in 30 seconds. Why? Because they neither take interviews serious. They believe that if they have been shortlisted, the job is done. No, the exam has begun right now. If you cannot market yourself, you cannot make yourself a brand. For that, you need to practice. How would you know what question you can actually bump into? For that, you need to research, prepare, and practice. So you can actually tell your story in 30 seconds. 30 seconds would be if somebody is given 5 minutes, student would say, ma'am, आपने तो 5 minutes दिए थे, उसमें क्या होता है? That is something I have actually heard, and I'm like, 5 minutes means like 300 seconds. It makes a huge time. So that is something. The only request I would always make to my listeners: remember that time is very precious, and you need to market yourself. You need to make yourself a brand. For that, you need to identify what are your traits that can actually attract others. So do that.
Okay, Aisha, you were going to add something, I believe.
Yeah, so I was just like adding, I think Tughlal was saying कि वो आपको एक so elevator pitch का ये मतलब नहीं है that it is the entire conversation. It is just to grab the initial attention.
True.
So of course, depending on that situation and depending on the context, depending on your elevator pitch, the other person might be asking you follow-up questions, and then there you can elaborate on your experiences, or perhaps maybe they could invite you for an interview. So there you'll get a chance to elaborate. So ये बड़ा ज़रूरी है to understand what is the objective of that 30-second elevator pitch, and then structure it accordingly.
Exactly. Just give them enough so that they're interested. Okay, so this is an important question, I believe, and the question is, and this is what I got. A friend shared it with me. I see that you graduated from a mediocre university. How do you compare yourself to other fresh graduates from top-ranking schools? And why should we consider you over them? So, and because there are a lot of universities opening up in Pakistan, there is a certain cloud with old traditional universities or high-ranking schools. They tend to prefer them over the new universities. So these kind of questions get asked a lot. So what is your take on it?
May I answer? Okay, thank you so much, Vikas. Vikas, let me tell you one thing that this is my life story, which I would be really proud to share, that I started my teaching career right after my matric. I was 15 years old when I started my teaching. I did my all education privately. My intermediate, I scored A grade in my bachelor's. In my master's, I had been a topper, and then my MPhil. Throughout, I had been an evening student. But today, when I see myself being with the corporate, being with really good organizations, if I see my students who graduated from NAST or LAMS or IBA or somewhere, I feel like if not over them, I actually stand equal to them. So I personally believe that it's not mediocre or it's not elite university. It's not American school or it's not A or B grade school. It is the passion that drives you. It is the inspiration that you take. It is the hard work and commitment. It is the trust in yourself. And it is the passion to learn from the people where you feel yourself superior, be in materialistic point of view, be in terms of talents, then you're a loser. Try to learn from every aspect, every experience, every word that you encounter and you come across, then you will be winning in the life. And if you study life of the legends, you will always understand that, always emerge from the scratch. So it's not the institution that will define you. It is you yourself, your passion that will define you. So that is something that matters.
Thank you so much, Fariba. It was really inspiring to listen to your story. Amazing, kudos. Aisha or Tugril, if you want to add something to this.
I do agree with what Fariba was saying, and I think it's highly offensive if a HR manager, hiring manager thinks that certain candidates from certain universities would not be as good. But unfortunately, this gets asked. Sometimes it could be another stress question, or sometimes it could just be how hiring managers might be processing. So how do you handle this question? Firstly, I think a lot of goes on to what Fariba was saying, that what are you thinking of yourself? Do you think that you are at par with anyone who has graduated from any other university? It is very important, because you can't portray that confidence, self-confidence, that confidence if you are thinking that my university was not that great, so maybe I'm not a great candidate. If you're there sitting in an interview and you've been shortlisted, that means that yes, the organization is seeing you as a potential candidate. Now it is your job to convince them that you are worthy of that position. Speak about your skill set. Speak about what have you done during your bachelor's or 4 years of studies or your master's. Tell them what you have done apart from just the university education, because more or less your academic degree, your subjects are same, right? Maybe the way they are taught might be different, but the technical knowledge is more or less same. What makes you stand out is that extra bit of effort you've put in. So tell them all the projects you worked, relevant projects that you worked on. Tell them about the skills that you bring to the table. Tell them how it is relevant to that organization. That is very, very important. Maybe or by research, what Fariba was speaking about, go prepared, research on what kinds of projects, what kinds of fields this organization is working on, and how your experience in a certain field could be relevant and could add value to that organization, and bring up those experiences when you're asked to prove yourself.
Okay. Thank you so much,
Vikas, I'm so sorry.
Add something?
Yes, Vikas, there is a question.
I saw the question.
Yeah,
I saw the
there is a question. Yes, there is a question.
Please go on. Please go on.
Okay, I'm so sorry. The question where a student, Muhammad Ahmed, asked, I'm so sorry. He asked because I couldn't actually, I am not actually, okay. He asked that if I'm going for an interview, Ma'am Fariba said that if I'm going for an interview, but I'm alone. So what I have to do, I tell my students, your phone is the biggest thing that you can actually make you feel how you sound. When we send a voice note, we listen it again. How are we sounding? So that is something that matters. Get yourself recorded in the phone and listen to it. Make questions, ask yourself and answer it. Stand in front of the mirror and practice. Sometimes be loud, your body language, your standing, your hands movement, your eye contact. These are all the things, the mirror and your phone. 2 things that can always help you. Thank you. And I'm so sorry, Vikas.
That's okay. That's okay. No, that's okay. Tabril, please, if you want to add something.
Just very quickly, I think, again, I agree with my other panelists, co-panelists, the question is a very bad one. And actually, a question, if this one comes across from HR, to me, it's kind of like a warning sign. Is this an organization that I really want to be a part of? And I would again draw, अगर ऐसी situation में आप पहुंच जाते हैं और आपको वाकई में नौकरी की जरूरत है वहाँ पे, तो फिर I would draw attention to the skills again that match that job requirement, rather than कि university देखें, I mean Dr. Abdul Salam, पाकिस्तान के Nobel laureate हैं, उनकी क्या early education कहाँ पर हुई थी, मतलब and where he ended up. I mean, those are the kind of examples that come to mind immediately. How irrelevant this question is, but when it happens, remind them about all the dropouts who are running billion-dollar companies right now around the world. Remind them of of all the top-level businesses that are being run by people who come from very average educational backgrounds. It doesn't matter. Just remember that the skill set that you bring to the table has to match what the job requires. Nothing else does.
So I see that we're on the hour mark, but I think I need to ask these last two questions because they are important, because these get asked a lot. What are your weaknesses and strengths, and how have they impacted your career so far? And the reason I want to ask this is, for some reason, people forget that they have any weaknesses during an interview. They totally zone out, like they're perfect. So how do you handle a question like this? And Togrul, if you could start.
Let me just see if I got the question right. You're asking what are the weaknesses about ourselves that we can bring up in an interview?
So if an interviewer asks you, what are your weaknesses and your strengths?
Right.
So, yeah.
So this is again a very important thing. अब ये किताबी बात आपको लगेगी, लेकिन ये बहुत जरूरी है समझना कि जिस वक्त वो आपसे ये सवाल कर रहे होते हैं, they are also looking for a match with the job. So, for example, you're somebody whose weakness is you're not detailed oriented. I'm somebody who's not detailed oriented, for example. And I'm giving an interview for a position which requires that kind of thoroughness. It is a good idea to bring up those elements of yourself where you're not very good, where you need development, because it helps you, number one, stay away from jobs that you're going to fail at. Number two, it helps identify to the interviewer that this person has a certain degree of self-awareness. और ये अगर क्योंकि सेल्फ अवेयर है तो इसको डेवलप भी किया जा सकता है. अगर आपने जैसे कहा वकास के अगर कोई बंदा आके बैठता है और वो कहता है कि जी मेरी सबसे बड़ी वीकनेस ये है कि मैं बहुत पैशनेट हूँ, लाइक आप वो उस तरह का आंसर एक बना के दे देते हैं. अगला बंदा बेवकूफ नहीं है, वो आपसे पहले कुछ 200 बंदे इंटरव्यू कर चुका है, आपके बाद उसने 200 और करने हैं. ये these things don't help you. Be honest. Again, look at the job description. Try to match your personality to the job description. अगर वहाँ पर आपकी weakness एक निकलती है, flag it and ask, okay, bhai, these are my development areas. How can you help me? Or strengths, much easier. Strength, try to bring up ये नहीं कि आप वहाँ पर जाके interview में कहें कि जी मैं cricket बहुत अच्छी खेलता हूँ. Try to bring up a strength which has relevance again with the job description, so that they know, okay, this is somebody who is a good fit in the organization.
Right. Thank you. Aisha?
So I just wanted to add to it. So I think it's, again, it's important कि वो realistic हो. Being a perfectionist is not a weakness. Most people would say I'm too perfectionist. So my deadlines miss हो जाती हैं, and attention to detail. These are not weaknesses. These are actually good things. So a weakness should be realistic, but at the same time, it's very important that the weakness that you're sharing is not something that is going to affect your performance on a job. So let's say if you are in sales and if you say you are not good in communication, so पूरी sales का crux ही communication है. So you have to be very mindful कि वो directly related या it's not a weakness that's that will affect your ability to perform on a job या उसका कोई key जो area है, it's not related to that. I also suggest, whether it's strength, weakness, or failure ka koi question ho, always use storytelling. So give them an example. Let's say teamwork is your strength. Tell them of a time where you used teamwork, how you used it. So it kind of gives an evidence that yes, this is their strength. It kind of adds some authenticity. And there are different frameworks that you can use. STAR ek framework hai, jo bada, which is really popular for storytelling. You define situation, you define task, action, result. SOS framework hai, which is situation. So you define the situation, फिर obstacle क्या हुआ कि आप teamwork कर रहे थे तो क्या आपका मसला हुआ, and then solution, how did you use your teamwork skills to to overcome that problem. So always give example. That's a good way to answer questions.
Right. Rabia, if you can quickly add.
Well, I would really agree to both the panelists, to their answers. To Sir, who has answered that the question is very bookish, but it is very much relevant that whenever they ask for your weakness, they're actually testing that that weakness might not become a hindrance in attaining their goals. So if the job is, strictly following a time pattern from 7 to 7 in the evening, and you say it's very difficult for me to get up early in the morning, and they would be, excuse me, you would not be hired for the job because the time requires they're very punctual. So the first thing, as sir has pointed out, that you need to actually see the job description, the requirement, and Aisha's point was really much important, that your weakness must not come in conflict with the job requirement or the job duties there you are actually doing. And again, storytelling is the best strategy. Even when I teach, I always go with storytelling. If you're going to talk about something, always present it in a way that, yes, never ever give a very, being perfectionist picture, because as sir has pointed out that they're not, they're sitting at some position, they know who, what is. So always be honest, do your homework, and don't try to talk about or don't apply for the job where you feel like you're not able to fulfill the requirements, or your habits or your weakness would contradict with that. Strength is something, yes, the way you market yourself is a strength you talk about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fariba. And I see that we have a time check of 4:10, but I want to close this session. Or if you could just give me your concluding remarks along with the answer to this last question, how should the salary expectation question be handled? And you can take your concluding remarks and then we can close it. Thank you.
Do you
So,
want
you can start. Aisha, you can start. Anyone can start. Anyone, please. Aisha, go ahead. Aisha, go ahead.
Okay, so do you want us to answer the question or give a closing remarks? I'm a little
If you
confused.
can answer, if you can answer the question and then also append it with the closing remarks, and then we can close.
Okay, perfect. So for salary range question, it really depends what stage of the selection, like the application process you are at. Sometimes, agar usually initial maybe kabhi pooch lete hain. So if you can, it's okay if you tell them, okay, I'd like to know more about this job, and then maybe share my salary expectation. Because once you share something, then and you come to know, oh, maybe I should have, maybe this was not a realistic one, or maybe the job tasks are way more extensive than what I thought. However, another way to answer this question, I would highly suggest research what is the what are like market competitive salaries for the positions you're applying for. Ask people who are working with similar positions. If possible, maybe do some research on what kind of salaries the organization also offers. So it's important to have that background research. I also suggest never to give a figure, but give a range. So kabhi bhi exact nahi de, jaise maybe 100K to 110K. Keep that range. Don't like बहुत broad range भी नहीं हो के 100K to 200K. थोड़ा सा range को specific करें, but then it's always a good idea to give range. Closing remarks, I think for all the fresh graduates or for all the students who are struggling for, who are looking for jobs, preparing for interviews. Again, I think our panel discussion, maybe we have discussed this, that it's very important how much input you and effort you are putting into your skill building. Very, very important. Just don't rely on what you have learned from the universities. Give yourself exposure. Skill building is very important. Soft skills especially badi zaruri hai. So the more you experience, the more you connect with people, the more you learn. So step out of your comfort zone and try to learn these important skills. Thank you.
Togrul, if you want to.
Sure, Ji. जो salary वाला सवाल है उस पर, I think it's a question that will come up every time. It's good to go into an interview with some amount of research you've already done, so that when you give your expectation, it is what I would like to call realistic. Because in my experience, it's sometimes happened that people come in and make outrageous demands, and what that tells to me as somebody who's looking to hire is this person is not hasn't done his research, doesn't understand what the job is, doesn't understand the job market, and is probably not right for this role. So come in, try to have a very realistic expectation. Number two, closing remarks, just my advice to everybody who's out there. Number one, good luck. Number two, remember, an interview is not a one-directional thing. It's not just them assessing you. It's also your opportunity to assess them. The worst thing that you can do to yourself is end up in a job with an organization that you hate. because you'll eventually end up being miserable and leaving. So make sure that this interview process is a bi-directional one. You're also doing your assessment of the organization, trying to understand their culture. Ask questions. Get clarity in your mind if there is some confusion. That's your opportunity. The interview process is also for you to learn, not just for them. So that's it. Thank you.
It's
Rabia,
my
if you could
turn.
please.
Okay, thank you so very much, Vikas. I guess like they had been really detailed with everything. I would be concluding on this very thing. I guess like it was my own choice to go on with the question. Was it, Vikas? Or did you ask any specific question?
No, I was just asking, how should an interviewee deal with the salary expectation question? And then you can add your concluding remarks at the end of this.
How an interviewee, sorry?
Should answer the salary expectation question. How much?
Okay,
So
okay.
if I'm the interviewer and I'm asking you how much salary do you expect?
Okay. That is something I would again comment on the very same thing, and I'll be talking about the same very thing that what matters is like how much research you have done about the company. I would always keep my focus on the research. Why? Because it matters like if you're going with some kind of salary expectation, however, the company doesn't pay that, or it is not something in their economic agenda or something like that, or it is going beyond their financial, what do we call budgeting, then you haven't landed at the right place. I always say that the most important thing is you should be knowing how does an organization pay to its employee. Your expectation highly matters, but you should, at the same time, obviously, if you're working or if you have mentioned that you have come up from an organization or you're going to another organization, they would have something in their mind. But at the same time, you always know that even organizations are bound to some budgets. They cannot cross that. For example, if I'm expecting a salary of IB or LAMS to be given in Wafaki Urdu University, then it would not be justified, because I should know, it is my homework that I should know that what is the market rate for that very particular organization and how do they pay. And then again, there comes one more thing, that is it a government organization or it's a private organization? And primarily, because I would conclude on this thing that research matters. Research about organization, about its employees, about its conduct, about its codes, about its salaries, about, again, research about your own resume, CV, how it is to be modified, how it is to be changed, what are the changing trends, how I have to present myself. So the whole thing, from the salary to presenting yourself to beginning till the end, from the pre to post, everything is basically based on research, prepare and practice.
Thank you so very much. So with
My
that, I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. I would like to thank Juan for organizing today's session and other events that it regularly organizes to develop the next generation of leaders. Thank you to everyone who joined us through various platforms, the Facebook Juan page, Education USA, and others. I hope it was a good learning experience for everyone and that it will help all of you with your career pursuits. Thank you.
Vikas,
take care.
Especially.
Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.